Good morning, Willowbrook. Thank you for joining us for our daily Devo as we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Now, if you just read this chapter, you may read it and go, why in the world is Paul telling people who are single not to get married? And does that mean we aren't to get married now? Or was I wrong to get married? Or why did I do this? And if you're going to understand this chapter, I need to get a little historical, cultural with you to understand the setting and why this belief was here. See, we need to understand how marriage in the Jewish culture in that day was so much different than we have marriage today. Today, a couple gets engaged and they choose a date, and if you're a friend, you'll get a save the date card sent out to you, and they plan the wedding. It's a big weekend and everyone shows up. See, in that day, if you were getting married, there'd be a betrothal ceremony that friends would come to. But after that happened, the groom would go back to be with his dad in his home, and the bride would go back to her home. And during that time, the groom-to-be, his purpose was to prepare a home for his bride. It may mean building a room onto the existing house. It could be remodeling an older room that maybe grandparents lived in at one time. And the bride knows she's getting married, but unlike our culture, she had no idea when she's getting married. Imagine every night she went to bed not knowing if this would be the night her groom would show up. See, there'd be a point eventually when everything was prepared just the way it should be. Then the groom's father would tell him, go and get your bride. He would yell out to his best friends who would get torches. They'd do it right around sunset. They would show up. They would blow a trump right outside her window, outside her house. Now, she's been anticipating every night about sunset. Could this be the night? Could this be the night? Then she hears the trump, and all of a sudden she comes out and she invites her friends, her bridesmaids, we'd call them, but the ones who would come with them, and they would have their lamps ready and the torches, and they would walk them back to the groom's house, and then they would leave them there, and they would experience their first night together as a married couple. Then everyone would come back, and there'd be a week of celebration, of feasting. And see, that's how weddings happen there. And so you see that picture of the church. You see how Christ said, only the Father knows when I shall return. He says in John that when he was talking about going to heaven and his disciples were kind of disturbed with the idea, he said, guys, don't you understand? I have to go away to prepare a place for you that I can bring you to be with me forever. That he's preparing this place. And this same idea that we as a church have no idea when Christ is returning. And we're to be ready knowing that any day might be the day that he returns. And so you see that picture, how it relates so much between that. And that's why the church anticipated. In chapter 7, verse 29, Paul even states, hey, listen, don't you understand? You want to remain single because the time is very short. Christ could be returning any moment. And he really believed that. And because of that, the church's anticipation was Christ was going to return soon. Now, we know that Christ has tarried almost 2,000 years. It's allowed us to take the gospel around the world, really billions who now come to know Christ over these centuries. But he could be returning any moment. Now, I love the principles that are in this chapter, that one of the principles we get for a married couple is that it is right for us to choose to please one another. Matter of fact, one of the reasons Paul encourages them to remain single, he says when you're single, all you have to worry about is how to please the Lord. But when you become married, you have to worry about how to please the Lord and how to please your spouse. Now, he's not saying that's bad. He's actually saying it good. If you're to the positive, if you are married, one of the things you want to do is please your spouse. See, sometimes I think, oh, we just please God and don't care about our spouse. No, we are to bring our lives together and we're to work to please one another. And Paul gives other principles in chapter 7 about marriage and how it's to mutually meet one another's needs. And we understand the importance of marriage. Paul was not anti-marriage. Paul's just belief was Christ was going to return any moment, and he tarried. See, until Christ returns, and we should anticipate his return at any time, those of us who find ourselves married, we want to please God, but we also have a responsibility to please our spouse. In other words, marriage is to be a mutually satisfying relationship, one that brings glory to God, but one that also pleases one another. And I'm afraid so many times in marriage, we settle. It's almost like the high point of marriage is when we get married and it kind of comes down from there. And that's not how God's intended it. your marriage can actually get better over time as you understand your spouse better, when you know how to meet their needs and they understand how to meet your needs, as you together please God, but you also work to please one another. And if your marriage isn't there, let me encourage you, talk to someone. Don't just settle for a marriage that isn't pleasing to God or pleasing to one another. As a matter of fact, we have a marriage conference coming up in January, a time when you can come and get away for a weekend and get some principles to help your marriage. And listen, you go to those not just to help a marriage get better, but to keep a marriage that is good, strong, to get a marriage that is strong even better. So I just encourage you, in this great chapter on marriage, it speaks to so many parts that we understand that a great marriage pleases God, but a great marriage also pleases your spouse. So guys, thank you for being part of our daily Devo. Continue the challenge as we work through these key chapters for the rest of the New Testament, and we're so glad that you're on this journey with us.